Warning: this fanfic contains strong horror, violence and pervasive gore. It may be disturbing to young readers. It may, no matter what age, affect your appreciation for certain My Little Pony, Friendship as Magic characters. Reader discretion advised strongly. It was almost 4 in the morning. At the hospital, one of the nurses was walking down the dimly lit corridor slowly. Up on the ceiling, one of the light bulbs flickered. It was about to go out. All was silent. Up ahead, the nurse thought she saw some pony quickly go back out of sight behind the wall at the intersection ahead, but she decided it was just her imagination. All the same, she was still freaked out. She never had liked working the late shift at the hospital, and she still didn't. When the nurse reached the intersection, she turned right. Yep. There was no pony waiting around the corner for her. She laughed at herself for letting her imagination get the best of her. The nurse turned into a room in the wall and walked inside. Inside of the room was a counter and mirrored cabinet that held bottle after bottle of different pills. She opened the cabinet, looked through it quickly, and grabbed the bottle of pills she needed. The nurse shut the cabinet, and in the reflection of the mirror, she saw a pony standing behind her, a pony with a cyan coat and a rainbow-colored mane, a pony who was also holding a huge knife in their hoof. The nurse screamed and the pony pounced and began dismembering her limbs. Blood splattered everywhere, and the nurse's scream was cut short. In less than 20 seconds, the nurse was in 7 different pieces. Blood was splattered all over the walls and the pony that had attacked her, and the nurse's insides were all over the floor. The pony that had killed the nurse reached up to the counter with a blood-splattered hoof, grabbed a bottle of pills, popped off the top, and downed the whole bottle. Then, the pony laughed crazily and flew out the window of the hospital room to go look for more ponies to slaughter. Sugarcube Corner was open all night, and now, it was almost 4 in the morning. It wasn't as crowded since it was so early, but Mr. and Mrs. Cake were there to serve the guests that were. There was suddenly a loud thump outside where the front door of the place was. "It sounds like another pony is here," Mrs. Cake told her husband. "I'll go see who it is." Mrs. Cake walked to the front door, wondering who else was up this early for treats. She opened the front door, stared for a moment, and Rainbow Dash woke up at about 6 in the morning. She had a massive headache. Besides that, the first thing she noticed was that she was soaking wet. She opened her eyes wide and her vision adjusted, and for a moment, she couldn't believe what she was looking at. She was lying in front of the counter at Sugarcube Corner, almost completely covered with blood. As she got up and looked around in horror, things still seemed too horrible to be true. The entire front room of Sugarcube Corner was splattered with blood all over the floor and walls, and even some on the ceiling. There was dead bodies behind the counter and more throughout the room. Not all of the bodies were in one piece, either. A lot of the bodies had been chopped up and dismembered, and body parts and guts were strewn across the floor in pools of blood. Horrified, Rainbow Dash realized that she recognized some of the dead ponies. There was Mrs. Cake near the front door with her throat cut so wide open, she was nearly decapitated. Rainbow also recognized Mr. Cake's body behind the counter and his head on top of the counter. Nearby where Rainbow had been laying, a huge knife was on the ground, covered in blood. Rainbow couldn't take any more. She ran to the restroom at the back of the shop, went inside a stall, and threw up. Rainbow slowly walked back into the front room to leave, shaking uncontrollably, covered in blood. She left out the back door, made sure no pony was around, and she took off, flying for her cloud house. When Rainbow got back to her house, she began to wash up as best she could. Her entire body was slimy with blood, and it took a long time to get all of it off her, especially her mane. When Rainbow was done cleaning all the blood off of her body, she went down to get the mail, and the newspaper was in the mailbox. She flew back up to her house and read it, and the top story was what she had expected it to be. 16 dead found at Sugarcube Corner this morning, along with a murder at Ponyville Hospital. Rainbow didn't know about the hospital, but she had a very bad feeling she knew who committed those murders at Sugarcube Corner, at least. She didn't go out at all that day, she felt very sick and worried. That afternoon, Rainbow Dash sat in her house, not doing anything. She just sat there all alone by herself in the front room. If only there was something she could do to take her mind off of what had happened that morning. Just something, anything she could do that didn't involve leaving the house and seeing other ponies. That evening, Rainbow Dash went into the restroom of her house and grabbed a bottle of pills that the doctor had prescribed to her off the counter. The pills were supposed to help the Pegasus sleep better, because she had started having nightmares several weeks ago, and after what had happened this morning, Rainbow was sure the nightmares would be extra bad tonight. Rainbow popped the top off the bottle and downed a fourth of the bottle of pills. She was only supposed to take 2 every night, but she had recently discovered that they worked better if she had a lot before bed. Rainbow awoke at about 3 in the morning, and she finally remembered what had happened the night before. Sitting up in bed, she remembered the thrill of everything. She remembered having a blast choking, slicing, dismembering, and cutting the ponies at Sugar Cube Corner. In fact, she recalled that she had such a good time, why not do the same tonight? She walked into the kitchen of her cloud house and grabbed a knife, then she took off, flying through the window. Rainbow Dash flew to Sweet Apple Acres and flew down to the barn. Opening the barn door, Rainbow looked around in the darkness until she found a hatchet that the Apple family used to chop down old trees. Perfect. Rainbow Dash, holding the knife in one hoof and the hatchet in the other, flew off again. In a few minutes, Rainbow Dash reached her cousin's house in Ponyville. Rainbow didn't like her stupid cousin, and her stupid cousin didn't like her. Rainbow knocked on the door of her cousin's house loudly, and dropped the knife on the porch. She wouldn't need that. Rainbow's cousin opened his front door, blinking the sleep from his eyes. Rainbow Crash. Is that you? What the hell are you doing, bothering me at 3 in the morning? I'm not Rainbow Crash, you jerk, Rainbow said in a menacing voice. Rainbow's cousin laughed. Rainbow Crash, Rain. He stopped suddenly, noticing the hatchet in Rainbow's hoof. Rainbow. What are you doing with that thing? He asked with fear in his voice now. Without answering, Rainbow hit him in the face with her hoof and knocked him back into his house. Stunned, he could only lay on the ground as Rainbow went over to his closet and got out a box of his house decoration lights. Rainbow took out a strand of these lights and wrapped her cousin in them tightly so he couldn't move. Rainbow, please don't, her cousin said, panicking now. Ignoring him, Rainbow dragged him to the bathroom. What are you going to do to me? Please, stop. Rainbow threw her cousin into the bathtub and with her other hoof, raised the hatchet and brought it down into his body. Blood exploded upward in a violent spray, getting all over Rainbow's face. Her cousin stopped screaming and he began choking on his own blood. Rainbow raised the axe again, and brought it down on her cousin again. And again, and again. The bathtub began to fill up with blood, which was also spraying all over Rainbow Dash, floor, and wall. After 40 chops, Rainbow looked down at her cousin but he was no longer there. All that was left was pieces of flesh, hair, guts, pieces of little bone, and brains lying in the blood-covered bottom of the tub. Rainbow stuck her face down into the tub, licking up some of the mess before she went on her way. Rainbow went outside her cousin's house, and saw a pony walking by outside in the dark. A late-nighter. Rainbow Dash flew up and landed in front of her. The pony who was walking stopped, and even in the dark, she could see the blood-covered Rainbow Dash standing in front of her, holding a knife. I like blood, Rainbow Dash told the scared pony, laughing crazily. The sight of it turns me on, know what I mean? The pony tried to take a step back from Rainbow. Rainbow stepped forward and shoved the knife so hard through the pony's throat, the point of it came out the back of the pony's neck. I think I hit an artery there. Rainbow pulled the knife out of the pony's neck, and her prediction that she had hit an artery turned out to be correct when blood gushed out from the wound at an incredible speed, splattering all over the ground. The pony was dead, that was obvious when she fell to the ground a few seconds later, but that didn't stop Rainbow from gutting her. Rainbow then sliced off a few limbs, dipped her hooves into the pony's blood, and rubbed the blood all over her body. Rainbow shivered and moaned slightly, the smell and feel of blood all over her body felt incredible. She rubbed more blood on herself, drank some blood that still poured from the dead pony's neck wound, and took off, looking for some more victims. Rainbow Dash flew over Ponyville and several miles away from the town until she spotted a campfire near the Everfree Forest and 5 ponies sitting next to it outside a tent. Rainbow flew down and landed in front of these ponies, startling them, the 3 mares and 2 stallions. The 5 ponies noticed instantly in the light of the campfire, Rainbow's blood-covered body and the knife she was holding in a hoof. "It's 3 in the morning," Rainbow said, laughing, while the 5 ponies stared at her in horror. "It's 3 a.m. So you should probably run. Maybe there's a secret way through the forest for you 5 to escape, but there probably isn't. And even if there was, it's too late, I already found you." The 5 terrified ponies started to scream as Rainbow Dash began to laugh and raise the knife. The screaming didn't last very long. After that, a noise came from the tent, so Rainbow went in there and killed the 2 ponies in there, too. Rainbow awoke at 6 in the morning with a huge headache. She didn't remember anything from last night, but when she woke up, she gasped in horror and disbelief. She was not in her cloud house, she was lying in a tent, covered in blood. Next to her were 2 ponies that had been chopped up inside their sleeping bags. Blood and guts were visible through the slashed-up material of the sleeping bags. Panicking, Rainbow ran outside the tent, but there were only bodies and body parts around a burned-out campfire. Rainbow stared for almost a minute at the mess, and then she began to cry and laugh at the same time. Tears poured down her face, leaving tracks in the blood there. In that moment, Rainbow was forcibly reminded of a song that Pinkie Pie had sang once: "Giggle at the ghostly, snortle at the spooky." Rainbow just laughed and cried, horrified, because she didn't know what else to do. All of this was all too horrifying, too messed up for Rainbow to handle. After a while, she finally regained some of her senses and she spoke to herself sadly, because there was no one else alive around. It was early in the morning. I just got outside a tent that I wasn't in last night. There's bodies lying all over the ground and I don't remember how they got there, but I guess I must have killed them. Killed them.